I see Obaid, my old friend from Dublin, on the call.
That is right, Supervisor Robert. How are you? Thank you for acknowledging that. Thank you.
Good to see you. And in the room, who do we have? Christy?
You've got me, you've got your staff, Nate Barreras, Jennifer Suda, Kadri Plume. We've got our few other staff in the back with Tamara and Dave. And then Director Branning has joined us in person. So he's
right.
Yeah, he's right back here. You go ahead and get the meeting started.
And I call this meeting to order at 4:04. Can we have the roll call?
Sure. Vice Chair Brown,
Here.
Director Hubbard,
Here.
Director Josie,
Here.
Chair Branning.
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right. Next up, we will open the meeting for public comment. Members of the audience may address the committee on any matter within the general subject matter jurisdiction of the LAVTA Board of Directors. Members of the audience may address the committee on items on the agenda. The chair calls for particular agenda items. Public comment should not exceed 3 minutes. Agendas are published 72 hours prior to the meeting, and no action may be taken on matters raised that are not on the agenda. Do we have any public comment?
We do not have any attendees in this meeting, and I didn't receive any public comment via email.
All right. Then seeing no public comment in the room either, I will close, open up the floor. And so we move on to item 4, minutes of the November 28, 2022 meeting of the Projects and Services Committee. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes? We have a
Move
motion.
approval.
Second.
All right, motion by Director Hubbard, seconded by Director Josie. All in favor?
Aye.
Roll call.
Roll call.
We do still need to do roll call? Okay, roll call then, please.
Vice Chair Brown,
Aye.
Director Hubbard,
Aye.
Director Josie,
Aye.
Chair Branning.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Motion passes. Item 5, dial ride customer service satisfaction survey. And
I'll introduce the item. Good afternoon, committee members. Kadri Plume will be presenting this item to you. This is our annual Dial-A-Ride customer satisfaction survey. We have some slides, so go ahead. Yes.
Good afternoon from me as well. LAVTA conducts annual Dial-A-Ride passenger surveys. Let's go to slide number 2. So we conduct those surveys every year. And this time around, the surveys were conducted in December 2022 and January this year. The surveys were performed by a third-party vendor who was a new contractor this year. And in total, they completed 187 surveys. I'm also going to add that we have about 460 active Dial-A-Ride users, and by active, I say people who use Dial-A-Ride service at least once in a 12-month period. So those 187 surveys included 3 different modes, and 105 surveys were completed over the telephone, 49 surveys were completed online, and 33 surveys were paper surveys. Also, Spanish language surveys were included. So the contractor asked the riders to rate different aspects of Dial-A-Ride service by asking 20 questions. And those service aspects asked about included the reservations process, pickup experience, ride experience, drop-off experience, and overall experience. Next slide, please. So this slide has a lot of information. It includes all 20 questions or statements asked about and the mean ratings over the years to those questions. overall, we don't really see dramatic change in ratings when we compare this year's results to the last year's results. But we do see an overall slight decline in ratings when we add them all up. And here on this chart, I have marked or highlighted the areas with the most notable change. So the green ones indicate a positive change and the yellow ones show a decline in satisfaction ratings. So in the next several slides, I'm just going to show you more detail on those six questions that we asked about. So first off, the responses to driver was on time statement actually increased when compared to last year, and they increased by 0.33 points. Well, let's do the next slide. Overall experience also increased by 0.28%. I mean, not percent, by points. Next slide. And here, and actually the no problem navigating the code menu. So this rating for this question went down by 0.34 points. And so it is indicating that the phone menu has become slightly more complex, perhaps that now when we share the operations contractor with County Connection, and as well as they also take reservations for the One Seat Ride program. So perhaps that gives people more information on the phone menu and makes it more complicated in their view. So the next slide, and actually the next three slides have something to do with the drivers, how people view their satisfaction with the rides and the drivers. Driver was dressed appropriately or clean, so this rating went down by 0.30 points. I'm just going to rush through those busy slides. So let's do the next one, please. So overall high level of satisfaction with ride experience, a very broad statement. This also slightly decreased by 0.29 points. Next, also the last criteria I'm gonna share is when asked for assistance while exiting the vehicle, the driver was able to accommodate, also decrease 0.29 points. So we conclude from this that, well, as you may remember, we had quite severe driver shortage starting in the fall and going to winter. And we did hire, or the contractor was able to hire new drivers. And we see now that they probably need more training, and as they gain more experience. So hopefully people have a better experience with the ridings and the drivers in general. This is the question. So this concludes my report, and if you have any questions.
Can you stop the screen? Are there any questions for Kadri? Could everyone hear that okay? We're also testing the audio here. We recognize we've got a fan kind of blowing in the background, so your feedback would be very valuable.
We can hear you. I can hear you fine. No fan background noise at all. My 2 cents. I see 2 hands raised.
Awesome. Yeah. Director Josie.
Thank you. I really appreciate the presentation. I could hear no problem, finally, when I figured out audio on my end. I did have a couple of questions and then a couple of comments. My first question is, how is overall experience different from overall high level of satisfaction? Can you explain why those 2 questions are there, and what we're hoping to gain by asking those 2 different questions?
So overall high level of satisfaction with ride experience is basically asking about the ride when person is on the vehicle. But the broad question level of satisfaction with the service in general. That includes everything, people's perception about everything from the start, making the reservation, and by the time they are getting dropped off.
So is it the wording of that question, overall high level of satisfaction, is it clear to the people who are answering the question that it means with just the ride piece as opposed to the whole experience?
I hope so, but it's a valid comment. I would, if you're asking the question, I would perhaps emphasize the ride by ride itself.
Yeah, the questions may need some tweaking. We employed a different survey contractor this year. It was a kind of a departure from the last 10 years. Like we had one surveyor for 10 years. And so I think it's worth a look at the questions. And we're also moving forward with putting out a contract or an RFP to hire a market research firm that can do this type of work for multiple years. So we don't have to have this change in contractor because they did employ a different methodology with the survey. In previous years, we had much higher percentage of phone surveys. This year, this contractor did a lot of paper surveys. So we do think there are some differences in just the collection methodology.
Yeah, I mean, if I were seeing it as if I were taking a survey online where I'm not asking, if I'm not having a dialogue with the surveyor, I might be confused by those questions where, if somebody's making the survey on the phone saying, okay, now we're going to turn to the ride itself and then ask those questions, it might be a little, you might get different answers. But I'd like to also just make some comments, and that is that, on time satisfaction is a much harder problem to solve, I think, than cleanliness of a rider and cleanliness of the drivers and satisfaction with the drivers. And so I think there's an awful lot of good news in here that overall satisfaction went up, on time response went up. And then the things that went down a little bit are easier problems to solve. Figuring out our phone tree, the menus on our phone tree, that's an easy problem to solve, a lot easier than making sure that we can get places on time, right? Driver training, now that we've got some drivers hired, training them once we have them is easier than going out trying to find people. So I think that there's an awful lot of good news there. I was a little bit concerned about the driver helping with offloading. That's a bigger problem, I think, to me, than making sure people have clean shirts on. So I hope we can really emphasize that in the next year. But overall, I thought there was some real good news here. So thank you for the report.
Vice Chair Brown.
All right, thank you. And Director Josie highlighted many of the things that I am going to voice concerns about as well. Driver on time was terrific, but the questions I thought were, even if you asked me, a director, wanting to give the best reporting back, I think I would be confused about some of the questions. For example, back to here, no problem navigating the phone menu. It's almost, if there's no problem, strongly disagree, it's a double negative, and that's confusing. But how was the phone menu? Was the phone menu easy to navigate? And even if your English is a second language, I don't even like the word navigate. The word use makes so much more sense. And I will definitely agree, there's a science to writing good questions so that you get the results that you're looking to get, not biased results, but independent results. But no problem navigating the phone menu was just beyond my simple minds. And then I was going to ask a question about throwing out the low and throwing out the high, specifically when the driver was dressed appropriately clean. I hope there's somebody was saying was the driver, like we're in complete sentences, but there was a 1% strongly disagree each year, as if one person wants, I don't know, a kind of different kind of uniform or something. Did you throw, when the statistics were put together, Kadri, was the high numbers and the low numbers thrown out in the data?
I'm just jumping in here for Cadre, but do you know, Cadre, if the survey company threw out the sort of the outlier data, the super high or the super low, to kind of just get rid of folks who love us or hate us no matter what we do? Probably not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I suspect when they answered 5, then they counted it as 5.
Yeah.
And 1 was 1, I suspect, so. This,
Yeah.
but something to address in a subsequent years.
Because, you know, we just did a questionnaire for the city council in an offsite. And sure enough, 4 of us did the questions with the 1 and the 5. And then 1 of us did the 5 and the 1. And so all of the answers were opposite. So I just want to, sometimes there's errors made in that specifically. But I agree with Board Member Josie. Overall level of satisfaction and overall experience, our overall satisfaction with the ride experience, still overall satisfaction with your trip or something would make it better. And I've got one more I want to make sure that I bring. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble finding this, but yeah, here we go. Overall high level of satisfaction with drop-off experience. And you know, I'll step back. Obviously, I've made my concerns known, but I'm not even sure what overall high level of satisfaction with drop-off experience. I guess pickup is only on timeliness, because sometimes pickup can also be where you greeted, where did somebody help you into the vehicle if you need it. It wasn't just the drop-off. So, all right, those are my concerns. Thanks.
Good. Director Halbert?
Do we allow for verbatim comments to be made, so that notwithstanding any of the questions, if somebody has something they would like to say, either for each question or at the very end?
Yeah. Yes.
And what was the most surprising thing or useful thing? I'm looking for usefulness. Like, how can we get useful information? Was there anything, are we going to make any changes as a result of it? And if you can measure it, you can maximize it. That's why I like having these scores. But I also like to just get blue sky and find out, is there anything that we can use that's meaningful?
There was a variety of different comments. Some people ask for actually it's just information and say their phone number. And they wanted just education, just follow up.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you now, Kadri. I don't know if there's a microphone near you. Say that again.
Yeah, so for example, what I remember, some people asked just for information about the service, or they wanted their comment was, please send me another Dial-A-Ride application to my friend, or things like that, and then they gave their phone number for follow-up. So there are things like that came up.
I'll just add that I didn't dig into the raw comments, which are always interesting, but just looking at the overall scores, I mean, I think the areas that we've been attending to are the areas we've seen some positive results there with on-time performance and drivers being hired. We have some work to do with the phone tree. We clearly have some driver training issues to attend to with the drop-off experience, the uniform, and we are working very closely with County Connection, who is our partner in this contract. And we will be presenting this to the board on the March 6th meeting, and we will invite our County Connection partners to attend as well. It's important that they hear this feedback too. So, and if you're interested, David, we're happy to send you or any committee member the full data if you'd like to dig into it. There's a lot of data in there, and happy to share that.
No, thanks. I just asked the question, what's meaningful out of it? Are you going to make any changes as a result? That's all. But anyway, thank you.
I love data. So.
Okay.
All right, Vice Chair Brown.
Yeah, sorry, one more note here. On the page that has the lines for comparing results, green is good. One of these results should be green, and it is no problem navigating the phone menu. So a lower number is a positive. This is positive negatives again, but a lower number would mean you don't have a problem. Or does it mean you do have a problem? So maybe you can answer that. I took it as if I don't have a problem, that's a good thing. So the number should be, I don't know. All right. It seems like it should be opposite. I'll let it go. Thanks.
Yeah, we need to stay away from those double negatives, I think, in the future.
Director Joseph?
Yeah, I think it actually is represented right because it was strongly agree or strongly disagree, one being strongly disagree that I had no problems navigating the phone menu. But anyway, my hand was up because I would love to see the data. It would become a public record then, so redact obviously phone numbers and things like that. But anytime we ask open-ended questions, I'd love to see the responses. So that would be great. Thank you.
And so with that, all I'd add is just a quick question on the selection method. Was it self-selected for people who took the survey? Was it randomly selected? How did we get the 100 and the exact number respondents?
We asked for random selection.
And we asked them to hit a certain percentage of our of those who have used our service in the last 6 to 12 months, so that they are, recent. They have a recent experience. Yeah.
Awesome. Then I echo what the other commissioner said. I think that, or the director said, it was, I think, clarifying some of the questions would be helpful. And I'll just say also that somewhere around for each question, roughly 80-something% of people were satisfied with the service. So I think there is something to be proud of in this data. It looked good, and often for the ones that went up, it was a change from people who agreed to strongly agree. And for some of the ones that went down, it looked like it was the same thing, people going from strongly agree to agree. So it wasn't necessarily a huge increase in people who were dissatisfied, but areas of improvement. So really taking it and looking at where we can do a little bit better. But I do, I read this data and I see people who are very satisfied, generally speaking, with this. Thank you. And I believe there's no action on this item, correct?
Sure.
Then if there's no further comment, we will move on to item 6, the shared autonomous vehicle project.
All right, I'm going to kick it off. Good afternoon again. This has been a long time coming. I've been working on this basically since before I started back here at LAVTA. Today, you will be receiving an update, an informational update on the shared autonomous vehicle project. I will be co-presenting with my colleague Nate, who's our capital projects manager. I'll take you through the first few slides, and then Nate will take you through the second half of the deck. And Obaid Khan is also joining us. You may recognize Obaid. He was working for the city of Dublin for many years, and I worked with Obaid when I was director of planning here. Now Obaid has transitioned to a new role as a consultant with Graybone Scott, and he is advising us on this SAV project, and we really are happy you could join us, Obaid, and thank you again for being the constant person through this SAV project since its inception. So with that, can you share the slides, Jennifer, and I will kick it off. Okay. Go to the next slide. Okay, so as mentioned, we are here to give you an update on that shared autonomous vehicle project. Today, we will talk to you a bit about the background of the SAV project, particularly phase 1 and the timeline, the route, and the lessons learned. Then we will talk to you about phase 2, which is the phase that we're currently in, and highlight the SAV route, our timeline, and some of the risks that we've identified. We also want to just check in with you on the status of the AV industry, the headwinds and tailwinds, and then open it up for questions and discussion. So I'm going to take you back 6 years, 7 years to before the shared autonomous vehicle project was a thing with a capital T. Around 2016, level 0 through 3 autonomous vehicles were commercially available. This takes the form of your lane departure warning, your brake assist, your pedestrian detection. All of these features combined can make your vehicle different levels of autonomous. Level 4 and 5 at this time were still somewhat futuristic. This is the vehicle that operates with no steering wheel and no brake. At this time, they were not widely regulated or commercially available in the US. You couldn't even import them. But there was a lot of interest in testing this technology, really, especially from a first last mile perspective. And I'll just remind everyone, including myself, at this time, 2CTA was really beginning to get into this space. Momentum Station became a thing. And so there was a lot of energy and interest in testing this technology. I'll also note that in 2016, we all thought it would be here by now. I think this AV technology has been 20 years away for about 60 years. So I just want to provide that context. Next slide, please. So with Scott Haggerty's leadership and Michael Tree's direction, LAVTA received nearly $1 million grant from the LAVTA procured a turnkey solution with TransDev to actually operate the vehicle. We received an encroachment permit from the City of Dublin, a permit from DMV, approval from NHTSA, which is the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration, I think. I'll let Obaid or Nate correct me if I'm wrong. And then we had limited testing at the end of 2020 into early 2021 at the East Dublin Pleasanton BART station. Next slide, please. So here's a map of the little route. It was super short. It really just, was designed to do some very limited testing from the BART station down to Arnold Road. This vehicle traveled at very slow speeds. I think it was 2 or 3 miles an hour. And next slide, please. And all in all, there were some lessons learned. There was, COVID obviously was presented itself in March. So there was a need to limit how many people could ride the SAV during phase 1. We recognize that strong partnerships are really essential in making this happen. And there were strong partnerships with our regional partner, MTC, as well as the City of Dublin. There was an interest in testing a vehicle that could go faster, particularly one that could interact with mixed use traffic on, for example, Dublin Boulevard. Testing under various environmental conditions proved to be a challenge. I think the ash from the California fires in 2020 was a challenge for the SAV. It caused some false positives on the radar and caused some visibility issues. In addition, FCC has restricted certain communications devices, and now 5G connectivity may need to be considered. And lastly, one of the big lessons learned was the SAV vehicle, which was the Easy Mile vehicle, was not fully ADA compliant. All right, so that takes us through phase 1, and I'll go ahead now and turn it over to Nate and for phase 2.
So phase 2, while phase 1 was underway, we started getting phase 2 concept moving along. And then the City of Dublin, they received this IDEA grant for about $360,000 from FTC for the ConOps and for the system engineering, which is better known as the SEMP work that we had been doing. This is basically we want to determine our communications and the requirements we need, as well as the final route that we're going to take. And we'll see that in the next slide when we get to it, the final route that we're going to more than likely go with. We also had a $2.7 million RM2 grant that was received at LAVTA through MTC, which was allocated $150,000 for the mobility hub design that Kimley Horn is currently working on. And the remaining funding of $2.5 million is going to be, in our documents, allocated to procure 3 SAV vehicles and the communications equipment needed to get this up and running. So our current grant funding activities that we have, there will be complete by the end of the year, which is going to be the SEMP and the ConOps from the IDEA grants, and then the mobility hub design, which is from the RM2 money. So in the next slide, hit one more time. And this is the proposed route for phase 2. It's supposed to be going up to the business complex where Zeiss is. So as you can see, it's about double in length from what it was before. And next slide, please. So the vision for the phase 2 was to have passengers come between BART and that Zeiss route that we saw. And originally before COVID hit, we had about 3,000 employees commuting to that business part. But since COVID really impacted the way people are working from home, commuting, we have lots of impacts that are coming from that office complex itself. And so the current demand that we have, it may not necessarily go along with what we were trying to accomplish originally with the SAB project. The other big thing that we're kind of running into for these risks is the operating funds, and we need to identify them. So we had talked to MTC about that to see what we wanted to do. We can use that money from that 2.5 million to use that towards the operating funds. And we were told that that wasn't an option with that current bucket of money. So we're going to continue the coordination with the city of Dublin on trying to procure these TDM funds from private developers for the operations of the SAB vehicles, which could be from the business park or other means. But again, as I said, without us identifying these operating funds, the project is at risk of being completed. Can you get the next slide? So to go along with that, we want to talk about pros and cons. So here are some tailwinds and headwinds. So the federal support on this, we know that USDOT is supporting to push mobility innovation. So there's funding this, and the grants that can include from that could be the Attain, the SMART grant, the RAISE, and the Department of Energy. Future workforce, so the unions, they're presented with new work opportunities. So it would be essentially changing from being a driver to being an SAD operator. It's something that they can incorporate with, and they can transition to and receive the training that they need to support all the mobility education they'll get from the drive, but from driving autonomous vehicles. And then lastly, in tailwinds, we have the next generation of transit is to be autonomous vehicles to complement our current infrastructure that we'll need to implement into the existing cities, to help underserved communities, and to gain the early learnings to the impacts of AVs on transit. To move on to our next slide, it's about our headwinds that we could face. There is a public misconception, as with anything new technology that comes, the public, they could be kind of leery about how we go about and how we approach that. So we want to know the difference between the ADAs we have in our vehicles now for automated driving assistive systems and the automated driving system itself, the ADSs. So it's something that we can educate the public on. And that's what a lot of AV companies are currently working towards, to make that more known nationally, so that we can have more ease of mind and more acceptability of the SAVs. Regulations are a big thing as well. And each individual state has their own legislation that deals with SAV regulation. California itself does not allow for a level 4 or 5 autonomous vehicle. There always needs to be an operator in the vehicles in our state as of right now. So that's a big deal when we're talking about the SAV. So they cannot be fully autonomous at this time. For the market conditions as well, another big thing, we've seen a lot of companies face a lot of instability and some economic challenges. We have some examples of some companies designing a vehicle for another agency, and then the company may turn up or go under, and then the money from the grant money is lost at that point. But there are current AV companies that are fitting the bill perfectly, and they're getting through these challenges, and they're actually being stable. So we move on to our last slide here. We have our current action plan as LAVTA and what we are trying to do moving forward. So we want to continue to get this grant funded work that we have completed by the end of the year and underway for the Mobility Hub design with Kimberly Horn. The CONOPS and SEMP will continue to move forward. And our biggest thing that we need to do is get operating fund money, so that way we can continue to have these operations for the sustainable life of the vehicles, whether we choose, what we'll talk to next is a turnkey solution, which be able to provide the vehicles themselves and operate for so many years under a contract where the liability and the maintenance doesn't fall on LAVTA or the city of Dublin. If not, we can also always go with our original idea that we have in the documents, which is procuring the 3 SAV vehicles and then developing a plan from there that we will present to MTC to move forward. But we did have a conversation with MTC a few weeks ago talking about what happens if we can't find funding for operating funding for this R2 project itself for the SAV vehicles. And they said that we can pivot the money to a different area and use it with a different project we need to that fits within the guidelines of our current grant money. And that's next slide, please. That's essentially what our plan is LAVTA moving forward, and we're more than happy to take any questions at this time.
And I'll just jump back in really quickly. Thank you, Nate. I want to give Obaid a chance to chime in and make sure we didn't say anything that was incorrect or neglect to mention anything. So Obaid, do you have any thoughts?
Yes, thank you, Christy. I was just wanted to mention that the MTC funding that City of Dublin received, that funding has been diverted to LAVTA now as of 2021. So there is a separate funding agreement between MTC. So that's just a one item. It's correct that City of Dublin did receive original grant funding, but then City said that since it was really needed for ConOps on SEMP, which is part of, so it was diverted to LAVTA. So that's just one item of correction. Otherwise, I think everything that you are saying is good. I have a lot of background, so I'm happy to answer any question.
Thank you. And before I close real quick, I just want to say that the big challenge is finding the operating funds. The RM2 money is capital only. And if we find the operating funds, we have to operate the vehicle for its useful life. That is per the MTC funding guidelines. We are not sure what the useful life of an SAV is. That is still TBD. But anyway, that concludes our presentation.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments from the directors? Director Halbert?
So what are the recommendations of staff? If you were us, what would you do? That's a question that I have. Comments that I have would be, this is a very expensive project that we've done. I fully support it in that I'm intrigued by it. I'm interested in it. I am cautiously optimistic that this will lead us somewhere. Somebody has to be the first one to step out and make things happen. We see other companies, I guess it's Uber and Google and autonomous taxi cabs and autonomous delivery vehicles and things like that. The private sector, I think the private sector sometimes with their own skin in the game pays a lot of attention to the details of making things happen. Are we equally as engaged, focused, incentivized, passionate about making this technology work, or should we just flush it and wait for somebody else to figure out, crack the code and make it work and be a fast follower? You know, what is this a headache for you guys? Is it still a cool thing to go do? But eventually, the only way to answer that question, I think, is to say, if this were on the front page of the paper and everybody saw all the details, would they say that we're being good stewards of taxpayer dollars? What would you do if you were us?
I will answer that question as best I can. So I think right now what staff is recommending, and this is not an action item, obviously, but we do want to continue with the rest of the grant funded work to do the design of the mobility hub and the ConOps and the stuff. But I think if we cannot secure operating funds, a new funding source, staff would recommend looking at diverting this funding to another eligible project rather than continuing it. And I'll share my thoughts on why. I too am really excited about this technology. I've been open about that. I love the idea of making buses safer. But I do think the COVID pandemic has really put a huge wrinkle in this. And I think even if we found the operating funding, we may not have people riding BART to commute to that office park. And I think that's a real reality that, you know, with depressed BART ridership and this hybrid in-office kind of commuting life, the demand for something like this may just not be there. So what I would hate to do is be the first to get it running and have no one ride it, when I think the intent of the pilot at this phase was to actually transport people in the vehicle. So, and I will also just add that in our conversations with MTC, particularly the staff who manages their IDEA grant, which is their innovative stuff, they appear less interested in this type of technology, and they appear more interested in transit signal priority and actually moving vehicles faster, which is my personal passion, if you will. So
If I had to choose between the two, I would agree with you, Christy. If it's a mutually exclusive this or that, I would have to agree and hope we can bring in some real good experts in traffic signaling. Okay, that said, I do know that that Pleasanton is bringing in 1,200 new Kaiser employees on the Pleasanton side. Probably more of a walking distance to the Pleasanton side of the BART station, but an autonomous bus at the Hacienda Business Park may have more riders. I don't know. But anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Director Josie?
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with what's been said, but I will say that I firmly believe that this kind of thing is the future of transit, particularly for short routes, downtown loops, merry-go-round types of ideas. And I do think, like, to Director Halbert's latest point, Kaiser, which is not far from the BART station, and healthcare, while there may be telehealth appointments, healthcare will always have people that need to be on site. I'm not suggesting we change the route right now, but you have to do proof of concept before you can implement, right? And so I am very supportive of moving forward with the design. If there is a way to change the route to where we know there's going to be people, I agree COVID has really thrown a wrinkle into this. I think it remains to be seen how fast people come back to the office. I think they are coming back to the office. They're not going to be back in the office in the volume that they were pre-COVID ever, I don't think. But I also don't think they're going to stay out of the office at the volume that they were during COVID either. I think we know that the pendulum's going to swing back at some point and level at a new set point, whatever that point is going to be. And I think that if we wait until that happens, we will have missed the boat. We know we already have a functioning pilot in Bishop Ranch that is moving people on, I don't know what level of SAV. And so I am very supportive of continuing on with the design work, continuing to see if we can find operating funding, see if there is a company that can even build us the vehicles that we need, and not pulling the plug yet. I like staff's recommendation of, study the course for a little while and see what we can do, but also not throw good money after bad if we find that we just, for whatever reason, we don't have the operating costs, we won't have the operating costs, and freeing up that money for something else if we find that we're just not going to be able to get there. But I think that we should not have that as a foregone conclusion, that we do absolutely everything in our power to try to make this happen. Because again, if we don't do the pilot, we'll never get the reality.
Thank you. Mr. Khan?
Thank you, Director Josie and Director Hubbard. I think that a couple of things I want to add to this discussion. One is that the first and last mile connectivity that Director Josie mentioned is one of the critical one. The reason that the transit service don't really successful in suburban areas like Dublin, Livermore, or Pleasanton is because regular type of bus service is very hard to provide that connectivity and access for people who are within 1 to 5 mile radius around transit stations like BART. So that is one of the key reasons for this type of service to be looked at and try to provide. That's really attracts BART ridership and also people who are around that area. So it's a win-win for everyone. So that's one of the things. Other thing I want to mention, that the way that the project is moving forward, it can be transferable to other jurisdictions. So we are making sure that as part of the system engineering management plan, or we call it SEM, which basically defines that how different technology pieces are going to come together and work. This is really the planning that we are making sure that off-the-shelf type of products we use, and we do not create something just only for Dublin. So if it needs to go to Pleasanton, if it needs to go to Lawrence Livermore Lab, or to have these buses running on Dublin Extension to connect to college access and other things, this is the way to get to that. And I'm really hopeful that we'll find operating money, which is definitely, Christy, as a point that we want to have some kind of support. So I just wanted to add to the discussion.
Thank you. And then I have some thoughts on this as well, and some questions first for the program itself. My understanding is you still need an operator in every vehicle in California per the legislature.
Correct.
While we need a person in the autonomous vehicle as well, what kind of cost savings are we seeing with the conventional, just driver assisted vehicles as far as miles traveled or service hours? Are there savings?
That's a great question. We are, one turnkey contractor gave us a price of about $250,000 to $300,000 for 1 year for one vehicle service. We can get back to you with the actual like kind of cost per hour comparison. It feels a little cheaper than a fixed route bus, but the capacity is also much smaller too. So if you were looking at the capacity, it would be more expensive. But we can get back to you on that.
They also gave us the expected life expectancy of an SAV vehicle to be 5 years on their end.
Yeah.
So they gave us a kind of an end date that goes with the RM2 money that says, okay, this is what we expect an SAV vehicle to last.
Right. So yeah, kind of what I'm getting at with this is that, so I love the idea of an autonomous vehicle, but as long as it's currently requiring a operator still, don't see a large advantage to the semi-autonomous vehicles. I think that they're really not bringing anything new where driver assisted, simple driver assist is plenty for safety. So smaller vehicles, smaller routes, I think would save us money actually in the end over the technological investment. I'd love to be a front runner on this. I'd love to be a leader on it, but the technology, as you said, it's, I would have said it's 5. They keep saying it's 5 years away. It's 5 years always. It's always 5 years away. And it was 5 years away back when they also promised us flying cars when I was young. And those were also 5 years away. And we're no closer on flying cars. And we're a little bit closer on autonomous vehicles. But if this is a pilot that's going to go on for 30 years before we actually get to the point where we do have truly autonomous vehicles running these routes, I think we're dumping money into a program that's not serving our customers. I do think personally, you know, it's probably a better investment of our money to invest in other options for the last mile problem. I think there are other improvements that need to be made system-wide, and where the money can be transferred, I would actually support transferring the money away from this program. That said, with the grant money we have, let's get as much as we can from the grant money. Let's move this forward. If there is some huge breakthrough in the next couple of years, both legislatively and technologically, this could be, you know, a panacea. This could be amazing. But I don't see that on the horizon, and I think that chasing that is really a poor investment of our staff time. And it's unfortunate. I would like it to be different, but the reality is this is what everything I have seen, every indication I've seen of the future of this technology is we will run out of grant money, have not made any significant progress, and then possibly be within 5 or 10 years then of having actual fully useful program. So I know there's not an action item on this, but that's kind of my feelings on where this is. Is there any additional feedback?
If I may just quickly, we do intend to come back to you this summer with an action. Either we've been successful at finding operating money, or we will be making a recommendation. So we will be coming back in about 6 months with another update. Perfect.
That sounds great to me.
And Nate and I are attending an autonomous vehicle and public transport conference in San Francisco. Obaid will be there as well this week, Wednesday and Thursday. And it's a really good conference. I've attended it. This is my 4th year. And it's a nice balanced picture of the industry. So we will have more information on Monday at the board meeting.
Awesome. Sounds great. Thank you. With that, we'll move on to item 7, preview of upcoming committee agendas.
Sure, I'll take this one. You've just got your regular committee items scheduled for March, and we may add to the list, but at this point, it's just like a regular.
Perfect. So then moving on to item 8, matters initiated by committee members. Directors, do we have any matters initiated?
Not for
Seeing
me.
none- Oh, go ahead.
Not for me.
Okay, seeing none, just from my end, I won't be at the next subcommittee meeting. I will be out of town traveling. So the vice chair will be filling in as the chair, and council member Kick will be filling in as a representative. With that then, the next meeting date is scheduled for March 27th, 2023. And we are adjourned. Thank you.